mute, Siwan. There you go, perfect. Oh, that's you, Siwan. Sorry, you're coming through like Minnie Mouse. Hey, is that her that I can hear?
I'm worried about opening my mouth.
You're back and you're good.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay, good. So that's a really good segue into taking in the good, because I hope everyone had a bit of a giggle about my new voice there. So I'm going to share my screen now and hopefully not resort back to being Minnie Mouse. Now, Janice, can I just check that you can see a beautiful picture?
I can, Siwan, thank you.
Right, okay. Well, hi everybody. I have been thinking about Australian stream management conferences today because I love them so much. They're my favourite conference, and I always enjoy them because we have such good conversations over morning and afternoon tea. And by the end of each day at the Stream Management Conference, your head is generally busting with all the things that you've seen and heard and chatted about. So I thought this afternoon that I would provide you with some fabulous photos and encourage you to take in the good. Now, when I'm preparing these sorts of presentations, it takes me several weeks to work out what I'm going to do. And yesterday I ran my first go at the talk past Pat, who I work with, and he gave me some very insightful feedback, which actually meant that when I woke up this morning, I completely changed the presentation. So I just feel it's really important to say that this presentation this afternoon has insightful input from Pat Goodker, just to acknowledge his contribution. So why am I talking about taking in the good? Well, really, I'm talking about it because I've had several conversations with Janice over this year. And we agreed that the Stream Management Conference and getting together are one way that we are able to connect with each other and really celebrate the fact that we are part of a great waterway management industry. And on this bridge, which is a field trip from one of our waterway management twinning programs in 2019, I think it was, we went out and looked at Budgerboom country, and we had just a fabulous time together. And that's what I think taking in the good is all about. It's about really paying attention to when we can enjoy and celebrate the work that we do. Now, when we think about that in relation to 2020, this is really the colour that we would associate 2020 with. It's beige and it's pretty boring, and it's been a really, really tough year. And for many of us, myself included, I've often felt really overwhelmed and quite isolated. And I'm based in Canberra on Ngunnawal country, and I have found myself feeling overwhelmed and isolated even though I haven't been at home for as long as our Melbourne compatriots really in our waterway sector. Now, overwhelm and isolation are quite common feelings, but it's when we have them for quite sustained periods of time as a result of our circumstances that they can really do some damage. So I've spent a lot of time this year actually trying to support people who have greater restrictions on their lives than I have. And I do this because I know these feelings of overwhelm and isolation from being someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is often the sort of feelings that you have from time to time, and gradually and hopefully less of them over time. So I've learned over the years that for overwhelm and isolation, you really need to learn how to ride out those waves of emotion so that you can get that surfboard flying. You have to accept that you're not going to feel great all the time, and there's no way I would suggest that that's not something that I know that it's not something we can all aspire to because we are emotional beings, but we can ride those waves, and riding them means that we know that eventually those tough times will pass and we'll come out the other side. One of the things I wanted to share with you was a metaphor that Pat and I use in our day-to-day work. So Pat's based in Sydney and I'm based in Canberra. And we don't bare our emotional souls every day, but we do use a metaphor to tune in with each other so that we know how we're doing on any particular day. And we have what we call our anxiety train. And so I can be saying to Pat one morning, look, I'm standing on the platform. I've got so much to do today. I've got so many Zoom conferences and I'm really quite concerned that I'm going to be boarding the train. Like I've got the ticket in my hand. And this is a way to communicate to Pat that I need some help today. I'm going to need him to take a bit of the load off me and I'm going to need a bit more support. Or Pat may say to me, you know what, I'm on the train. I am on the train and I'm not looking at getting off until I get a whole range of things done. And so it would be best if you didn't necessarily contact me all the time today. Now, being on the anxiety train is shitty. We all know that, but we do know that we can eventually get onto that platform and then eventually leave the station altogether. So that's just one way that Pat and I talk about how we're feeling. And we find that it really works because we can also have a bit of a joke about it. But it's also a shorthand way of saying, you know what, I'm on the platform, so, you know, I'm not feeling great. Or I'm nowhere near the platform, I've had a great weekend, let's get on with things. So I thought I would share that with you just as a way of showing how we can tune into our emotions and use metaphors and our own stories to actually get in touch with each other. The other really important thing I do to enable me to ride out those waves of emotion is to practice savouring. Now, savouring, you tend to always think of savoury food, and I do like savoury food. I'm more of a cheese and chips person than I am chocolate. But savouring in this sense means savouring those experiences, like this one, where I'm in my kayak, I've got my best friend Greta behind me, I'm taking the photo, and we've been exploring the Breadbow Gorge. And it's just a really fabulous place. And I'm hoping that you're all drinking that image in, so that those of you who haven't been able to get out and about can actually see that these places are still there and they still exist. When I can't get out, what I do is to actually have a notice board. And on this notice board, I place photos from my latest holiday. So the photos you can see here are from a trip that we did in July, just before all the lockdowns really hit hard. And in this trip, we went to Byron Bay and we went to Gundabooka National Park and Murruwinchi National Park. And it was just a wonderful time. It was with friends, it was with family, and you can also see some cards there for my son's 18th birthday. He's recently turned 18. So I can go and look at that board and know that those places still exist and that those times really happened. And I find that they are another way to bolster that emotion. And what I'm doing when I do this is something that Rick Hansen talks about and which relates to this term, taking in the good. So if we move through our day with an open awareness of the many good things around us, we can start to correct the brain's built-in negativity bias. Now, those of you who know me know that I don't often watch the news. I will listen to it occasionally and I might get little excerpts. But my negativity bias means that if I get a dose of news every day, then I'd basically give up on working in the environment sector. I'd feel very disillusioned and I'd find it really hard to continue. And that's because negative thoughts stick like Velcro, whereas positive ideas and good feelings are like Teflon. So you actually really have to work hard to take in that good. It's a conscious effort. Now, what I want to point out here that's really important is that this doesn't mean I want you to pretend that you're feeling good. I don't want you to plaster on a smile when really and truly you're feeling crappy. As I said earlier, emotions pass, and those crappy emotions are ones that all of us are familiar with. But it is about thinking and paying attention to when things are going well and when you're having a positive experience and when you're enjoying yourself. And so here's Finn looking out over the Snowy River, another of our campsites, and he's savouring those experiences and feelings, and he's really letting them seep into his bones. And for any of you who have teenage kids, I have found getting out into the bush and away from mobile phones and away from all the pressures of being a teenager, that camping is fantastic because it's physical, it's out in nature, And really, you've just got to go with that experience. And Finn now says, I need to go camping, as a way of saying, a bit like the metaphor with the anxiety train, a way of saying, I need to get out of the hurly-burly of year 12, which is the year he's in this year. So that's a bit about me and why I think taking in the good is important. What I want to do now is to suggest to you that you can take in the good using ABC. And I'm going to demonstrate how we do that in relation to what we've heard today and how we've experienced today. Now, A, B, and C stand for awareness, balance, and connection. And I credit this to my friend Susie Nethercutt Watson, who works at Two Green Threads, a wildlife charity. And the charity is particularly important because it actually focuses on wildlife carers and their mental health. So that's something that's dear to my heart, and I really feel privileged working with Susie on this initiative. So A, B, and C stand for awareness, balance, and connection. And I want to explain them to you now. So A is for awareness. Now look at this absolutely beautiful river. This is a river in the Pilbara. We were on our way back from Ningaloo Reef and we'd stopped there for a break. I just love the soft greens, the rich reds, those beautiful white gums. It was warm and it was just a wonderful place. These are some of the rivers we've been talking about today, Australia's arid rivers, those amazing places that Ian talked about. We can be aware that working in the waterway industry, we are caring for these places, even though we're not physically there, because we raise people's awareness and eyes to the fact that we have these amazing rivers. Today, I have tried to be like this reed warbler, rather than the duck. The duck is what I feel like a lot of the time, where I'm smooth on the surface, particularly when you can only see my head and shoulders on a Zoom call, and underneath my feet are doing the tango, or just racing really hard like those ducks on the water. But today I have felt a bit more like the reed warbler. I've looked around, I've really enjoyed listening to the presentations, seeing the faces of some of the presenters, and thinking about who else is out there watching those presentations with me. So I'd recommend trade the duck for the reed warbler when you can. What's come through really clearly today is deep Indigenous knowledge. Not just the myths and the stories, which are incredibly important, as Brad talked about, but that traditional ecological knowledge and just general knowledge that we can use to enrich our understanding and connection to the landscapes and the rivers that we care about. We've heard a lot about river diversity, whether you're looking at it from a geomorphological perspective, or from a hydrological perspective, or an ecological perspective, or a sociological perspective. We've got amazing, diverse river systems in this country. And I'm just the same as Ian in that my face is always plastered over that big red earth whenever I'm flying over it. I'm constantly amazed at how much our understanding is being built and extended through the work that we're now doing in environmental flows. I work on the Flow MER project that Paul mentioned earlier, and we had our annual forum a few weeks ago, and we just are learning so much more about how we can use our environmental water more effectively. And Paul shared some of those results today. And that for me leads me to have a greater awareness about our need to continue celebrating about what is good. Take in that good, because that good then enables us to continue to deal with the things that are a little harder to deal with. What's become abundantly clear throughout the day is that rivers are transdisciplinary. There is no one discipline called river restoration. We need to bring them all together if we're to continue to work for the betterment of our rivers. And of course, you would fully expect hearing from me that we must put people into the picture. Because when we do that, we enrich the ways that we can look at our rivers. We bring in multiple viewpoints and perspectives, and we generally come up with much better ways forward. So that's awareness as I've thought about it today. Let's now look at balance. And I'm not all expecting you to chant Om at this point. Now, balance is highly subjective. It means different things to different people. And today we've heard quite a lot about things that are not in balance. So for Brad, we've got some progress, but we're still waiting to really get meaningful results for Indigenous people and their role in making decisions about water. We heard from our Mekong guest from Cambodia about the community was disconnected through the Mekong River decision and the dams. and yet they were able to come back, and they were able to prevent further really discord and disharmony going on in their river. We looked at the impact of feral horses on vegetation and fish and water quality, a story dear to my heart because it's in the upper reaches of the Murrumbidgee. We heard from Ian about the bad that is beef cattle. Although it's incredibly important to our economy, we still need to do more and more to protect our rivers from the impacts of cattle. And certainly a lot of the work we do through the Rivers of Carbon program is fencing stock out of rivers and improving our stock management. And we've also talked about bushfire impacts, Jason and Max. This is an image from the Murrumbidgee River Corridor where we do a lot of our work, and we've had some really devastating results from the fire storms that swept through the Murrumbidgee. And we're now starting to rebuild and trying to encourage landholders that it is worth actually putting those fish habitat back into the river and revegetating their riparian zone. So with all these examples, really what we're talking about are the values that we all hold, because it's those values that really give us a sense of what we think is right or wrong, what we think is in balance or not in balance. And so my belief for river management is that we really need to be transparent about what those values are. We need to let people know what we're thinking and where we're coming from, because it's only when we do that that we can engender trust. And trust is made up of 3 components. Trust is built on being authentic. I like to think that people know where I'm coming from. I tend not to be hiding behind a particular facade. I like people to know that this is what I believe and this is what I care about. And we need to do that if we want people to trust us. We need to have empathy. Empathy is very different from sympathy. In sympathy, you're often imposing your feelings and your sense of something onto somebody else. With empathy, you're considering the position that another person might hold. You're doing that, stand in their shoes, see it from their perspective. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to agree with what they're talking about, but it does enable you then to get a different point of view. And finally, you need that logic, whether it's the traditional ecological knowledge that Brad was talking about earlier, or whether it's a scientific or technical knowledge. That logic, that rigour, needs to underpin those relationships for them to be trustworthy. So those 3 things are needed. And when that happens, then we start to be able to push back on some of those things that we see are imbalanced. Today we heard about removing dams. I would so love to see that happen in Australia. We also heard for the call to preserve our arid rivers. And my belief is we need to let people know more about these amazing rivers and how important they are. We can welcome environmental flows when we come from a place that explains why they're so important and the emotional strength that they have in terms of being able to reinvigorate areas that have such strong cultural and spiritual significance, along with ecological significance. We can champion Aboriginal voices. When people know what our values are and what we care about, then our ability to champion becomes so much more powerful. And the other area that I think we really need to continue to work is to work with those who, as Ian pointed out in his, actually, they don't own the rivers, but the rivers run through their properties. So that's landholder by landholder. They're all completely different and they all have different value systems. And so finding someone like Keith in this picture who's putting his feet up after a hard National Tree Day planting is about understanding his values, where he's coming from, and whether our work and our programs can align enough with his to be able to get something done together. And when you get that shared sense of purpose, then you can start to build teams of people who believe what you believe and who are able to go out and work with you. And I feel really blessed to have Lucy and Ben from Greening Australia and Laurie who work with us on our on-ground program. So that's the B for balance. Let's now look at connection. I absolutely adore this photo. It's by Will Higginson, and one of the really great things of being part of the FLOMER program is that I'm getting access to all these wonderful photos that our researchers and people working out in the regions send in. So connection in this sense is all about floodplains being connected to rivers and vice versa. We've heard quite a lot about connection today. We've heard about connections for rivers to reef with the sediment plumes and the sediment issues. But we've also heard about connection to culture and country and community. From Kirsty, we've talked about alien connections. Now, I'm not quite sure I want ET to join my river management team, but hey, you know, if it's new technology and it's going to help, then maybe that's the go. I was quite pleased she sort of came full circle at the end and said that us humans would still be needed, so that's a good thing. Upstream and downstream connections for our fish. We heard about golden perch. In this photo, we've got this beautiful Murray cod with a pit tag. And one thing we have missed out on today is seeing everybody's faces. So one of the real challenges for us this year has been running a waterway management twinning program when we can't get together. One of the main things for the twinning partnership is for the mentor and the mentee to get together and visit their place. We've had to do that virtually, and this is our waterway management workshop number 2, which we had to hold online. But you can see here that we tried to make things a little more fun, and the wigs and the hats got more and more outrageous as the day went on. So this is about connection. And interestingly for us, the mentoring program has become even more important, as so many of our mentors and mentees are based in Victoria, many of them in Melbourne, where they've been unable to leave their homes. And so that's where mentoring, taking that time to listen to somebody else and to support and care for them, has been really important. So for me, in terms of my commitment when it comes to connection, I need to keep listening and learning so that I can learn more about other cultures and how I can work to ensure that I respect and bring culture into our work at the River Restoration Centre. The other thing I've been doing is reminding myself about why I do what I do. So when Laurie goes out on site visits, I'm now tagging along. And on this particular trip, which was just before COVID got bad, we were visiting a whole series of sites for Macquarie Perch, and I saw a beautiful property, and I'm delighted to say that I was able to purchase that property along with some like-minded individuals, just as a result of having been out there that day and happening to say that if it were to ever come up for sale, I'd be keen to have my own little stretch of Murrumbidgee River that I can work on. And the other thing that's really important is to ensure that you have some fun. And I know that during this COVID time that care packages have been a thing, that we've been sending ideas and gifts and all manner of things via email and also via the post. Our team hasn't been able to get together for a while. We are hoping to have a spring garden party at my place in a few weeks' time, COVID permitting. So I'm really hoping that that happens. Getting back to those waves of emotion I talked about earlier on, the other thing that I've started to do much more in my life is to prioritise family and nature. My connections with nature have really made a huge difference to me and to my life. And so going camping whenever I can, which I'll be doing in a couple of days' time, is just essential. It's my reset button. And I really encourage you, if you can't get out there yet, to go back and look at photos of when you've been out in nature and talk to people going out there and get them to send photos of what they're doing, knowing that it will happen for you soon. So as I conclude, I want to make the point that you have to consciously choose to take in the good. The good doesn't stick like the bad or the negative. The good goes through a sieve, just like this water is, unless we consciously choose to take it in and to make it a priority. So just in this last minute or so, I want you to sit and take in the good of this absolutely beautiful photo taken by Heather McGuinness. Just let that seep in. Just look at how gorgeous it is. Imagine sitting there and just taking it in. And think about today and the ABC. The awareness that we're part of a waterway industry where we believe in the value of rivers and people and communities and culture. That we strive to balance the various values that we link to our rivers, and that we need to continue doing that and to continue to be open in being realistic and authentic about what we believe. And that we need to stay connected and to look forward to the next Stream Management Conference when we can share a glass of wine together and enjoy each other's company. So with that, I'll end and say thank you, and again provide you with another beautiful photo, this time from Tanya Doody. This is post an environmental watering event, and I invite you to take in all the good that it shows. Thank you.